It's time for the Severe MMA Preview Show with Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and your host, Ian O'Neill.
That is right. It is Ian O'Neill, joined by my two brothers, Harry Powell and Spencer Kite, is back with us again. What seems like it's been an age since the three of us have been together, but we're here to talk about a couple of things in the UFC. Not all UFC fight night cards are as bad as this one, so we're struggling to kind of get up the motivation to kind of big this up or big this fights up. We're going to talk about a couple of other different things along with this card tonight on the preview show and just change it up a little bit. Spencer, welcome back. Did you have a wonderful vacation?
It's good to be back. The vacation itself was wonderful. The time away from my computers, from the grind of work was wonderful. Getting back has been a bit of a chore. COVID hit the Kite household. And then on Monday we were in a car accident, so the car is totaled. It's been a rough return to Abbotsford, British Columbia, but we're doing all right. It's good to be back with you guys. It's good to be back talking about fights, even if it isn't the biggest card of the year.
Indeed. It's great to have you back as well, Spencer. Harry, fresh off the mats tonight, joining us over in London town. How are you, sir? You're coming off watching the latest round of ADCC. Don't get you started. We could talk about that for an hour, I think, if you had your way.
Damn right. I'm well, sir. Thank you very much. Like I said, I've just rushed in. I've just absolutely inhaled some food. And here we are. We're ready to go. Let's fucking do it.
It was impressive. We got the front row seats to you chowing down. It was actually impressive. So it was. So let's get onto it. Look, we're not going to talk. Mackenzie Dern and Yan Xiaonan is the main event on Saturday night in the 115-pound division. There's another couple of fights going on as well under that. We'll get into that in a few minutes. So right now, I want to kick off this kind of the most pressing subject, the most a hot topic, if you must, from last night, Dana White's Contender Series. Bo Nickel performed on the show, got rewarded finally after his second attempt, a UFC contract. And I just want to get everybody's thoughts on Bo Nickel and how far they think they can go. Or he can go, not they can go. He can go. Spencer, I'm going to send it over to you first. How excited should we be getting about Bo Nickel at this stage? Let's be real. Look, he went in and fought two bums in the Contender Series. Before the fight last night, I was just about to tweet out a GIF. You know the goat that they put out on Jurassic Park, where they rose him up in the cage. Yeah, they rose him up in the cage, let him down, and just let the T-Rex have his way with him. I think that was kind of something like what we seen last night when Bo Nickel entered the cage. But look, he went in, got the job done. That's not his fault. How excited should we be about Bo Nickel?
I think we should be extremely excited, but also make sure we remain a little bit measured here, folks. I saw some people last night or Tuesday night doing the Bo Nickel Khamzat Chimaev right now. Let's go. Let's just get him in the UFC. Okay, let's get him in. And look, if you want to skip over the lower half of the middleweight division and put him in there to take somebody that's on this card on Saturday with a Krzysztof Jotko, with someone of that caliber, right? If you want to put him in there with Brad Tavares when BT's ready to come back and just get an instant test of where this guy is, fine. I'm okay with it. I'd like to see what he can do because thus far, he's been really impressive. And it's not just, for me, it's not just that he's gone out and trucked these two dudes because that was always what was going to happen. The big takeaways for me have been the transitions and the speed with which and the dexterity with which he's able to transition through different things and through different moves. And so you saw in the first fight, he got in there and was just quick with getting to the back, getting the choke in. And then on Tuesday night, knocks Donovan Beard down, moves right into a mounted guillotine. It's not there. He looks briefly at another front headlock kind of series choke. It's not there. Slides around to the back, can't get that, but locks up a triangle right away and is doing all the right things of getting under the leg and tightening that way and taking his posture and balance away and gets the finish. And that's the piece to me that for a guy that's only 3 fights into his pro career and doesn't have a ton of MMA experience, even if it's just, you know what I mean? It's not the best caliber of opponents, but you see those pieces, and it's those pieces that make me believe there's real high upside here. We're seeing hands already. We're seeing raw power that's there. That's only going to get better as he continues to work with that coaching staff down at ATT. And so I think he's the best prospect to come along in quite some time. But I also think projecting him to be a champion today is a little bit getting ahead of ourselves, because let's see what happens when he's in there with some more experienced fighters, some guys that can stuff a takedown, some guys that can defend on the ground, some guys that have hands of their own. But he looks as good as advertised in terms of a prospect right now.
Yeah, I mean, Henry Cejudo last night described him as the best prospect ever in MMA, which is quite interesting to me. I think it's very, very early days at this stage. Harry, how familiar are you? I know, look at the Dana White's Contender Series on a Tuesday night. It's at a bit more of a friendlier time for myself and Spencer here in Canada. Have you had the chance to watch Bo Nickel? What are your early thoughts on him overall, maybe, and the level of skills that he has acquired to date?
So I've watched both of his fights, in both of his recent fights in the Contender Series. For sure, impressive. For sure, I agree with Spencer that the transition for the finish was the really interesting thing. And I think the speed of the transition was the interesting thing too. The thing that I like about him is his ability to not get fixated on a single thing. And that's really important, right? We clearly know where the strength lies. The strength lies in the wrestling, right? The strength lies in the dominant top control. It lies in the double legs. It lies in the duck unders. It lies in the general wrestling exchanges. But it seems as though there was this myth talked about by wrestlers that the grind of wrestling is so hard that if you can get good at wrestling, you can apply that same grind to striking or jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. And for the most part, we've seen wrestlers stick to wrestling for the most part, right? With Bo Nickel, it seems as though he's actually living that myth. He's actually living that prophecy. And that's an interesting prospect. I think, to me, the thing that Bo Nickel signifies is that we're entering a new era, a real new era of MMA. And that's the crossover athlete. So we were blessed with, Brock Lesnar and Johnny Bones Jones in terms of athletes and Demetrius Johnson. But these were guys, not naming, Brock Lesnar. John Jones was a freak athlete and comes from an athletic family. Demetrius Johnson was a labor worker, but happened to be a really, really good athlete as well. And now we're seeing an era of MMA where legitimate top tier athletes, I think Spencer tweeted out, now I don't really know what this means, I don't really understand the rankings, but there was something of Bo Nickel being a Big Ten athlete across all sports. Now, I don't really know what that means, but if that means that across the entire across the entire country of America, Bo Nickel is in the top 10 of every athlete, both NBA, NFL, NHL, etc. No? Okay. Because I was going to say
that's just a typical US thing to do, where they just disregard any of the other sports and just count basketball players, baseball players, football players. Spencer, you have a better outlook on this than me.
So the Big Ten is a collegiate athletic conference made up of a number of powerhouse Midwest schools: University of Michigan, Ohio State University, Iowa, where Bo went to school at Penn State. Predominantly, they are football schools. They are also very good in numerous sports, football, basketball. There's some good track stars. There's some good swimming, things of that nature. In those power conferences, in those conferences like the Big 10, like the Big 12, like the SEC, like some of these major conferences, it's usually a football athlete that will win, or some dominant athlete. It's not often a wrestler that will win conference athlete of the year. Now, looking at the Big 10, and I know Brent Brookhouse from CBS tweeted me today that it was, a different number, tried to put it into some context. I went and looked at it. There have been 32 people that have won Big 10 athlete of the year, and a third of them have been wrestlers over the course of whatever it is, 20 odd years, 30 odd years. To me, it's just one of those things that in a year where in 2019, Ohio State went to the Collegiate Football National Championship, where Justin Fields led that team. He is now a quarterback in the NFL. And Bo Nickel was still that dominant in his sport to be the Big 10 athlete. So this major powerhouse conference where he's not just the wrestler of the year, he's the overall athlete of the year, is a major accomplishment.
Definitely. As usual, that's dumb American things. Fine, that's fine.
Yes.
But what it signifies to me is that we're seeing legitimate A-star tier athletes making the choice to come to MMA. Now, of course, from a wrestling background, MMA is a shoo-in. You've got a combat sport already. You've got an amazing base for MMA, but to make the choice is a very different thing. So I feel as though Bo Nickel's performances and his trajectory, the UFC are aware of the caliber of athlete they've got. Hence why we're seeing the fandom and, the fanfare and the parading and all of these sorts of things. So, that's what it signifies. Am I excited? Sure. But as always, I try not to buy into the hype of anyone until I've seen some questions asked and answered. And please don't put him in there with Brad Tavares, because I like Brad. And if it goes wrong, I don't want to see that. But Brad Tavares is a perfect litmus test. A perfect litmus test. If he goes in and barrels through Brad Tavares in a round, then we're looking at him as the same caliber of prospect, and, hear me out, as Edmund Shabazian. Edmund Shabazian goes in, destroys him in a round, and everyone's like, title shot right now.
Yeah, it's like that fine balance, isn't it? You know what I mean? You can go the Hamzat Chimaev route and just go for the stars straight away. Or we've seen what happened with Edmund. There's probably a bunch of other things happening if we're being real in Edmund's case as well. But he got a little bit rushed. Sean O'Malley could be another one that we're going to see in a couple of weeks' time as well. Is he getting pushed? Hindsight is a great thing, and we won't have those answers until the fights happens, obviously enough. You said that you are excited. You're not getting overly excited, but the UFC is definitely trying to get us excited about this guy. And I'd love to ask you, Harry, because, it's fresh on my mind today. I listened to yourself and Sean on Speaker's Corner on the Patreon. Head over there, sign up. Excellent podcast again. But, you mentioned something that the UFC is not actively building stars, or has not been, you mentioned Sean O'Malley and his Twitch following, and other fighters as well who are building their own profile outside of the UFC without the UFC's help. My question to you is that with this whole making him fight twice on the Contender Series, this whole putting him in front onto the EFC, or what's it called, the UFC 4 game, is this an active push from the UFC to try and build his star power? And might we see this happening further down the line with other stars as well?
So my answer is still no. Bo Nickel, people knew who Bo Nickel was prior to his UFC splash. He competed against Gordon Ryan, so the grappling world is well aware of who he is, right? I think that what the UFC is doing a great job of recently is piggybacking and elevating a profile that already exists. Because if we were seeing that they were building stars from the ground up, well, then they'd take more of a Bellator approach, where we talked about Aaron Pico on the Hot Topic. That's a guy that, yes, okay, people knew him for the boxing accolades and this and that. But in the MMA world, nobody really had an idea of who Aaron Pico was until he joined Bellator at 0-0 and Bellator matched him the way they did and showcased him in the way that they did. Now, of course, there are elements of Aaron Pico's stock and profile that Aaron Pico has done himself, of course. But Bo Nickel is a man that cerebrally understands the platform that the UFC is, and he's looking to spread his arms as wide as possible. Otherwise, when he got that triangle and he goes backstage for his interview and he's like, let me fight in the WWE, that wouldn't have been the first thing coming out of his mouth, right? That man knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
Ultimately, he will lose. And he will lose because the house of the UFC always wins. And you mentioned Sean O'Malley there, and I'll round my point out with this. We're saying, is Sean O'Malley getting pushed too soon? This is deliberate. Sean O'Malley complained.
I said that from myself, and Sean did a video on Severe MMA. It was my first thought. It was like, be careful what you wish for. This is what is happening, and this is what does happen in the UFC. You talk some shit, they'll put you in that position. You say that you're not getting paid enough, that you don't want to sign, or you don't want to fight lower ranked guys when you're not getting paid money. So the UFC will pay you good money and they'll put you in with the elite level guys. There is no fucking middle ground with Sean O'Malley there. It's been happening, listening to your podcast and your with Sean as well. This has been happening for years. I can go way back to Randy Couture and Ken Shamrock, who are having the same issues with the UFC way back in the day. And Randy lost 2-3 years of his fucking career fighting in court. And like you said, Harry, ended up losing in the end. And it's a sad reality that I guess that we're faced with now, is that, well, Harry, what you're saying is you play against the house. The house likely always wins, with the UFC gaining most of the benefit from these situations.
And the thing that I think about the Sean O'Malley situation that rings the most true is, if he goes in there and beats Petr Yan, the UFC still wins, because you've now got a literal bona fide title contender having gone in and beaten likely one of, if not the most well-rounded fighter in that division, a guy who can do it all. Okay, maybe you look at TJ Dillashaw or whatever. But a really difficult styles matchup for Sean O'Malley. And if O'Malley goes in and wins, the UFC's like, knew it. See, that's why we put him in there. That's why we pay him the big bucks, boys. If he loses, they're like, see, told you he wasn't ready.
100%. And that's proof in the pudding and their treatment of Khamzat Chimaev after he absolutely completely fucked the card, and pay-per-view card as well. Remember Dana White calling John Jones a sports killer when he didn't accept a fight at 7 days notice against Chael Sonnen. Well, your star boy Khamzat Chimaev just fucked the complete card, fucked up your complete plan to fuck over Nate Diaz as well. And you're out there saying, well, I guess we're lucky that fight never happened. Were you not thinking that before the fight was made as well? Of course you are. So you're just showing your hands to us now. I mean, it's frustrating looking at it. I mean, it's frustrating, knowing that it's been happening for donkey's years as well. And it's likely not going to change. But I digress, I guess. I mean, any other thoughts on this before we move on to the card itself?
I just want to break that fight and get your reaction.
Go for it.
Just seen on Twitter, Arman Saryukian, Demir Ishmagulov.
Yes, my boy is coming back.
Fight.
That is a great fight.
That's a serious fight.
What date?
It is December the 17th.
What a fantastic day! The day of my birthday. They gift me that fight. They gift that to me on December 17th. A gift from the MMA gods. I love it.
I would love to see that headline. Give me that over 5 rounds. That's a 5-round fight. If ever I've seen one, that's a 5-round fight. It's maybe not a main event, right? Whatever. But there's so many things that could happen in a 5-round fight between those two boysies. I would absolutely love it. But anyway, yes, let's talk about the card.
But what are your early thoughts on that fight, Harry?
Chaos. Absolutely. Like, Ismagulov is a very up and down, straight to the point, really long jab, really long right hand. happy to wrestle, really good defensive wrestling. Arman Saryukian, big head kicks, bit of spinning stuff, obviously can scramble with the best of them. Like, we saw that against Gamrot. This is wild, written all over it. That's what this is. I feel like, sorry, I'll just say one more thing. I feel like this is a brilliant matchup for two reasons. One, because the UFC know that Arman Saryukian has the look, can talk the talk, and can do the fighting thing. That's the trident of stars. Demiris Magulov may not have as much of the look, maybe can't do as much of the talking, but can absolutely do the fighting, right? You go in against Gamrot, very, very close fight, score it either way. Let's not have a scoring discussion now. But Ismagulov is the next guy, right? There was the Tridents, and Joel Alvarez was one of those guys. We saw what happened when Ahmed Saryukin fought Joel Alvarez. Ismagulov is now the last guy. One of these guys is going to go and take a big leap after this fight again. Whoever wins this fight takes a big leap. So I love the matchmaking from that perspective. I think this is a fair bit of matchmaking. I don't think they've taken a step back at all with Arman Saryukin, and I appreciate that. That shows them that they also understand that Gamrot fight was extremely close. So I love this fight.
Lovely. I think some would say it would be a step back in name value, because maybe some of the casuals would not be aware of Ismagulov, but definitely not in skills. Skills versus skills. This is a high level. This would be along the same lines as we were talking about Gamrot and Saryukin, as in the level of skills that these two guys are going to bring in, and I'm looking forward to that fight deeply as well. We're talking about building stars, and I think that kind of action is in motion for this Saturday night's main event between Mackenzie Dern and Yan Xiaonan. For me, looking in, and my observations is they're trying to get over Mackenzie Dern here as best as they can. They're trying to get her and to garner up as big of a kind of a win streak as they can for her to get her into that title shot. She is a very marketable fighter. She is improving more and more as we see it. Is she championship ready? Spencer, that's the question I'll ask to you.
I mean, it's hard for me to say she's championship ready when 2 fights ago she got beat by someone that to me is championship ready, and that's Marina Rodriguez, who feels like the person that is going to get skipped over here. Shawnee and I, on a State of the UFC, maybe even 2 back, in talking about this, said this is what's going to happen, is they're going to find a way to sort of work things that Mackenzie Dern moves ahead of Marina Rodriguez. On Friday, I will have a piece out on OSDB Sports, sort of breaking down this division, breaking down kind of what I see this fight as and how things are going to go, and the overall sort of gauntlet that we're continuing to see in this division, and sort of things that Harry and I have talked about, things that Sean and I have talked about in terms of champions are getting booked right back into championship fight. Former champions are getting booked right back into championship fights after winning one. And then you get contenders like Marina Rodriguez, and to a lesser extent, Mackenzie Dern, constantly fighting this churn of top competitors to where everybody's fought everybody, but nobody's getting the opportunity to fight for the title. So we're probably going to end up in a position where Mackenzie Dern's going to face Marina Rodriguez again. Or I know she's come out this week and said, I'd like to face the loser of the title fight, or Rose when Rose wants to come back. Fine, great. Jessica Andrade is still out there as well. But I agree with you, Io. This looks like, let's get Mackenzie Dern into the clubhouse as the pole position leader for the next title shot, provided it's a good win, provided it's a impressive performance. Then we get to see what happens with Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Lemos later on in November. And then we see what happens with Carla Esparza and Zhang Weili at Madison Square Garden at UFC 281 and go from there. But this feels very much like, hey, Mackenzie Dern, here's your second main event. Go get a win this time.
100%. She tried and failed against Marina that time. Picked up a nice win over Tisha Torres by split decision. A good win. Tisha is not easy to get a win over. Split decision. That being said, Yan Xiaonan coming in on a losing streak right now. So this is really set up for Mackenzie Dern, isn't it, Harry, to go in there and get the win?
Absolutely. And I think it's a nice styles matchup too. I think Mackenzie is going to be the more physically dominant fighter. Clearly, you know, one of the things that we've seen with her work with Jason Perillo is that she's working her hands to get into the clinch. And this is the game plan, right? This isn't me spouting new knowledge, and this isn't me degrading the game plan either. Khabib had the same thing. He began to work the hands, work the kicks, work everything, just so he can get a hold of you. And when he gets a hold of you, he's going to fucking ragdoll you. The same stands for Mackenzie Dern. That's the plan, right? The plan is stay sound enough on the feet in the mid-range, and as soon as she can get close, take the fight down, and it's done, right? I think the physicality is going to be a problem here. Yan Xiaonan doesn't have massive stopping power. And look, Mackenzie Dern does get hit less and less as we see her. And Yan Xiaonan has range, and she has a nice jab when she uses it, and she has some leg kicks. But I don't think that the chain takedowns are going to be stopped that well. And look, it wouldn't surprise me if we see Mackenzie pull guard, pull into a single leg X, pull into an X, pull into something, pull into a leg entanglement just so she can use it to sweep and get on top. I don't think, or even just jump in close guard, right? Like, I don't think if Mackenzie Dern, and we've seen it previously in other fights, I don't think Mackenzie Dern is adverse to that in this fight. And you're both very right. And this is why, one of the reasons why this is a very dry matchup for me. Because if Yan Xiaonan wins, then the UFC are like, well, shit, what do we do now? You know, then they can be like, well,
shit, we got to give Rodriguez the shot now. We've got to, never mind her multiple fight win streak. But
Amanda Lemos is like, tough out.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's all. This is the problem with it, is that then is dependent on her beating Amanda Lemos, which isn't an easy task. But if Amanda Lemos wins that fight, well, she's only 2 fights removed now from losing to Jessica Andrade. And so we're right back to where a former champion is standing there going, cool, get me back in there. And if Zhang Weili beats Carla Esparza, as I think we all expect her to, then we get a rematch of a fight that lasted 52 seconds if they put Andrade in there. I think it would be a different fight a second time around, because obviously Andrade is better and Zhang Weili is better, and you know, fights aren't often mirrors of each other. But this is it's the banking on an outcome without preparing for the worst possible scenario. And it's what ends up happening in most of these divisions. Like, it's happened here, it's happening at bantamweight, it's happened at welterweight where Colby and Masvidal just kept going in there, happened at lightweight and I know it's the one that Sean really harps on a lot, with Justin Gaethje kind of always hanging around, Dustin Poirier, Mike Chandler, those guys just hanging around, fighting each other, and then being like, cool, I got to win. Where's my title shot? Well, do more. And so if you're the UFC, there's one outcome that you're hoping for on Saturday. And really, like, you're hoping for first round, second round, something dominant where you can then go, look at how good she is. Look at how much she's improved since that loss to Marina Rodriguez. Away we go.
Do you think that Mackenzie Dern is capable of going in there and getting a finish, Harry? I mean, you know, Yan Xiaonan, we saw her getting grounded and pounded from the crucifix position against Carla Esparza at that time. Is that something that you feel Mackenzie Dern would be looking towards, and would something that would give her confidence coming into this fight?
I mean, ground and pound, obviously, that's not going to be the route to victory unless, you know, the world ends and the jiu-jitsu fails. But yeah, of course. I mean, Carla Esparza is obviously a dominant wrestler, has a very good top game. But Mackenzie Dern from the crucifix is going to one-arm choke you. That's what's happening, right? She's going to get under that chin and she's going to find a way. I mean, I say find a way. The finish is pretty rudimentary when you're under the chin from there. But if Yan Xiaonan isn't able to create scrambles and is making the plethora of mistakes needed to end up in a bottom crucifix in an MMA fight, Carla Esparza isn't the most dominant wrestler, doesn't have the most potent submission game, doesn't have the most potent ground and pound either. She's more of somebody that will stick you in a position and make you work, and then you make a mistake and then she progresses. Mackenzie Dern is going to slice through that guard like butter, right? And it's not going to be long until we see Yan Xiaonan in some really tough positions if she cannot stop that takedown.
Indeed. Spencer, one last question before we move on to you, and it's a simple one. Mackenzie Dern, yes or no, do you see her becoming champion in her career?
No. I just
Harry?
don't, I mean, just
Go
don't
ahead.
see it. I mean, the submission game is great, right? But when you can't, I don't think she's ever going to bolt on enough additional pieces to where they're good enough that she can go in there and hang with someone as powerful as a Zhang Weili and as well-rounded and athletic as a Zhang Weili, or as powerful as a Jessica Andrade, or as fluid as a Rose Namajunas, that these people that are going to be able to do more than just do more offensively and have the capabilities of dealing with her grappling acumen.
Yeah, I would tend to agree myself. I think, like, look, she's doing all the right things and getting up and getting the training in with Perillo, who was a fantastic striking coach. But it's kind of intertwining all those things together is what makes you an elite fighter. I think Mackenzie Dern has enough to get herself to the dance, but it's her dance partner in a title shot is going to be someone like Zhang Weili or Rose, and I think that's just going to ultimately lead to a pretty one-sided beatdown, to be honest. When plan A doesn't work, I don't know whether she has a plan B in her repertoire, but time will tell. She has to get over Yan Yan, which is likely will happen this Saturday night in the main event. And we shall move down along and talk about a couple of other fights. I got mixed up with the co-main event. I'm getting mixed signals. A lot of it, even on the UFC website, Randy Brown and Trinaldo is listed as a quote-unquote co-main event. Harry tells me that there's a heavyweight fight that's going to be, or Maxim Grishin and Philip Lins is listed as the quote-unquote co-main event. Both of these are terrible for whoever is the co-main event here. I mean, come on. Fucking hell. What are we doing here? It's like, I don't know. I don't even want to get into that conversation again. The illustriousness of a co-main and the main event has just dwindled with these fight night cards, to be honest. Let's talk about Maxim Grishin. We'll talk about briefly these two fights in a little bit. Griffin and Lins, if it is the co-main event, Spencer, what can we expect to see?
Shite.
Yeah, kind of grindy, not sloppy, grindy, light heavyweight action. I mean, Felipe Lins looked much better last time out against Marcin Prachnio than he had in his couple of heavyweight fights, because I don't think he's a heavyweight, right? He's a guy that went up to heavyweight because, hey, why not? And had some success in the PFL doing that against other not great heavyweights. Couldn't hang with Andrei Arlovsky and Tanner Boser. Came back down to 205. Looked better last time out against Marcin Prachnio. But I mean, it's Marcin Prachnio. Maxim Grishin has been, uneven in the UFC. Debuted at heavyweight, so you kind of give him a pass on that one. But I mean, is a guy that struggled against Dustin Jacoby. And as much as I like Dustin Jacoby's story of late for coming back and stringing together a bunch of victories and, an undefeated run since returning to the UFC, it's still Dustin Jacoby. And so this is going to be, in my estimation, a lot of fence grappling, a lot of clinch work, a lot of, man, the referee should break them up, a lot of work to advance your position. Hey, guys, do something or I'm going to break you up. All right, stop. Now we move back into the center. Now we move back onto the fence. And it's just one of those fights that doesn't do a whole lot of anything for either guy, for the division. They're going to happen. And I'm usually the chief advocate for all fights matter. And all fights do matter. This matters for each of these guys. But it's not a great fight. It's not going to be entertaining.
It's bad if Spencer is talking it down. It's bad.
If even I'm sitting here being listen.
I know.
And there's some fights on this card, and there's some people on this card that I am genuinely interested to see. But this just isn't one of them. And if it's the co-main event, we're picking the wrong fights here.
Absolutely. Look, the co-main event listed on Tapology, Harry, is Randy Brown and your favorite fighter, Francisco Trinaldo. I think, look at Randy Brown is sneakily putting together a little bit of a run here in the welterweight division, picked up recent wins over Alex Oliveira, Jared Gooden, and Chaos Williams in his last fight. Comes in here against 44-year-old Francisco Trinaldo. This is basically set up for Randy Brown to get a win over an old veteran, a name, to kind of shed more light onto his star. It would equal a 4-fight win streak for him. He'd likely be looking at, you would think, close to top 15 competition if he was to rack up a 4-fight win streak. Do you feel the same as what I feel? It's just kind of a setup for him to go in there and put a beat down on Trinaldo.
I mean, look, Fire Hydrant Trinaldo is even at 44 still dangerous, right? We saw that against Danny Roberts. He can connect. He can find your chin. He can do some horrendous fight IQ things. But Randy Brown, you mentioned there that he's sort of snuck up on the division a little bit. I actually think, to me, Randy Brown has sort of played this middle era of his career really, really smartly. He came into the UFC and he was doing all of the things of, I'm going to be a champion, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go and fight everyone, I'm going to whatever. And I think he elevated his own stock a little bit too high before the skills were there. He's a fighter, as we know, very long, very rangy, good jiu-jitsu, all this stuff. And he hadn't yet gotten to a position where he knew how to fight in his own body. We've seen now in the last little while with his performance he's been putting out, that stuff is starting to click and he's starting to look like a more complete fighter. And this is where Randy Brown gets more interesting, is it's times like this when things are starting to click. He's a man now, he's matured mentally, physically, and the performances are starting to come together. This is where it's exciting for me. So if I'm Randy Brown, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to use my range, I'm going to use my length, I'm going to stuff the takedowns when Trinaldo tries them, and I'm just going to go out and win this fight. And as we do, as you say, I'd be very interested to see who they match him with next, because it should be a step up. It should be a test. It should be a, look, fair play to you. You've gone away. You've put 4 wins together. You've put 4 wins together. They've been impressive. They've been good performances. Let's see what you got.
I'd like to see him go out there and put away Trinaldo and really make that statement and you know, call somebody out on the mic. Why, just do it. He's at 32 years of age now, Spencer. It's make or break now for Randy Brown in his career, really, isn't it?
I don't know if it's necessarily make or break, but this is the point where he's sort of progressed. Like, I talk about it a lot, and we rush. We want to rush prospects. We want to rush fighters when they get to the UFC, right? So he has this splash where he comes in off looking for a fight. It's the same card as Mickey Gall. They come in at the same time. Both come out and get wins in their debut. And here we go. It's this guy that Dana White and the crew discovered. Well, then he stumbles in his second fight. And he has a couple of, you know, not great performances or some uneven performances because he's just a kid. Starting out, he's 27, 28, hasn't figured it all out. But as Harry said, these last few years, he's figured some stuff out. The only loss that he's had in his last 5 fights is to Vicente Luque. No one's going to fault him for that. Loss before that is Nico Price, when Nico Price did Nico Price things and hit him with hammer fists while holding his head up with his foot off his, like, ridiculousness. Fine. Before that, it's Bilal Muhammad. Can't fault him for that one. Bilal's great. He's unbeaten in his last 9 fights. And so this is just a guy that has progressed sort of naturally through things as he's gotten better. While it may be do or die or make or break in terms of really having a push, if he's ever going to make that push to title contention, I think this is him coming into his figure out and set myself up where I stand in the division for the next 2 or 3 years. Like, this is his opportunity to be kind of the low rent Neil Magny. Somebody in that range, right? Where he's, you know, probably outside of the top 10, but in that 11 to 20 for the next 2 or 3 years, where he's winning 2 out of every 3 fights, 3 out of every 4 fights. He's a tough out for up and comers. He's a good guy against a ranked guy that's coming down off a loss and needs a rebuild, and maybe Randy Brown goes up. This is just a guy that has worked his way to where he's at sort of the peak of his powers and still has a chance to show us a little bit more. And if he can go out there and, as you said, put it on Trinaldo on Saturday and get a victory and put him away, that's still a statement, because 44 years old, Trinaldo's still a tough out.
Definitely is, and it'll be interesting to see how he's not. I was going to call him the Jamaican sensation. I guess everyone is a Jamaican sensation if they come from there, but we'll see what happens there in the welterweight division. Ronnie Barcelos and Trevin Jones are fighting in the bantamweight division, moving right along. Both of those guys on 2-fight losing streaks. Sadiq Youssef against Don Shanias. Spencer?
I think it's Shanus.
Sadiq Youssef, always an interesting character. It'll be interesting to see how he does there, coming off his win with Alex Caceres. Looking forward to seeing Sadiq in there, Spencer?
I am. I mean, this was supposed to be Giga Chikadze, right? So it's a bit of a disappointment. Couple weeks ago, that fight gets scratched a week out. We hope everything's all right with Giga and he can come back. It's a bit of a letdown. I want to see sort of how Sadiq handles this, right? He is a colossal favorite. Every expectation is that he goes out there and just stomps this dude. But this dude is, finishing some people in the first round. Now, one of them is Jay Ellis, who has 104 losses in his career. He is a professional opponent. But before that, or after that, sorry.
That is the most elegant way that I've ever heard somebody describe a fighter like that. We would
professional opponent.
A professional.
I mean, this
opponent.
is what these guys are. This is
a mold.
No, I mean it's literally turn up to catch a couple $100 to get a loss. That's what it is. That's what Jay Ellis should write on his fucking CV. What do you do for a living? I lose fights for a couple of quid. That's what I do. But the fight after that is Cody Pfister, who had a cup of coffee in the UFC, is a tough kind of grimy Midwest dude. And so we'll see if Don Shainis can go out there and make Sadiq work a little bit, can put a little bit of hesitation in him. I'd be really interested to see if Sadiq goes out and decides, oh, this is me coming to make a statement, or this is me just, listen, I'm gonna beat this guy clean, but I'm not gonna take any unnecessary risks so that Don Shainis doesn't land something on me that really spoils this situation. So that's the thing I'm looking forward to in that fight.
Are you looking forward to Sadiq Youssef, Harry? Not really.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, fuck Lloyd Irvin. I'll say that to begin with.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Secondarily, Sadiq Youssef's a good fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter. He knows how to do the fighting things. And for a man that knows how to do the fighting things, I'm more than happy to watch you at all times. I'd be interested, as Spencer said, to see what the mentality is here, but I'm also interested to see whether we see any developments in his game. I'm not somebody that craves a finish. If I see a domination, a really interesting performance, some new wrinkles, some new things that he's added, I'm down for that too. I'm an analyst at heart, right? So I'm just excited to see what Sadiq Youssef brings here and which Sadiq Youssef turns up, because I remember the Arnold Allen fight, and that was a fantastic fight, really, really good fight, and we know how good Arnold is. So if that Sadiq Youssef turns up, then your poor man is getting absolutely fucking trucked, right? But as you say, we know that a fighter's mind is a fragile thing at the best of times. And if he comes in and he sees the wide favorites, does he come in and does he coast a little bit? Does your man make it a little bit more difficult for him? Do we see a bit of adversity? I'd like to think not. I'd like to think Sadiq's, he's had enough time to realize a new opponent, enough time to make adjustments away from Giga Chikadze, which, by the way, is a fantastic fight. And yeah, look, I mean, these things happen.
That's it. You took my very point in Sadiq's most recent losses from Arnold Allen, which is completely fine. Arnold Allen, top level guy, has not been beaten inside the UFC after that. So I would expect Sadiq Youssef to come in here and take his reads within 1.5 minutes, then offload, and in the next minute, I'd be very surprised if Don lasted 3-4 minutes in this first round. And I think, you don't crave that finish. I think, within reason, fighters need to kind of take those chances to kind of get those statement wins and, to give fuel to the fire that this guy doesn't belong in here. I need to step up in competition. Similar enough to what I said with Randy Brown as well. That's just the way I look at it. I know it's not as easy as that. I know when you get in there, it's completely different. You could have injuries. You could have other shit that goes on during the fight. But, you know, it's a real chance here for Sadiq Youssef to go in there, get another highlight win, knockout, and he's off to the races. Let's do the Chikakakatse fight somewhere down the line, maybe before the year is out, if he gets out there unscathed. So that's what I'm here for. I do enjoy watching Sadiq compete, as a lot of other people do. Slava Claus is in action again. He is coming back in against Mike Davis after a disappointing loss to Mark Giacchese. Giacchese came in, surprised everybody apparently with his wrestling.
Did you know that Mark Giacchese can wrestle?
He can wrestle. Yeah, DC, motherfucker. It's simply what he did all the time in his early career, but however. But yeah, Mike Davis, I think Spencer is a bit more of a favorable matchup for Slavakov here, I think.
I mean, listen, this is just a banger, right? This is if it goes the way we all want it to go, this is two dudes stand in the center of the cage, touch gloves to start, and then just start throwing. And they're technical, and they've got power, and they've got speed and crispness. I mean, Mike Davis went into his Contender Series fight against Sadiq Youssef as the favorite in that fight. And Sadiq came out and was like, oh, cool, you want to do the boxing? Great. I'm going to chop the shit out of your lead leg, and then I'm going to box you up. And Mike Davis had to have a reset. He came into the UFC on short notice, lost to Gilbert Burns. Nobody's faulting him for that. But he has looked dynamic in his last two fights. He welcomed Mason Jones to the UFC. That was a great fight. He's been hurt and sort of sidelined since. He was going to fight earlier this year. They had booked him for London, and he said, I don't want to go to London, so let's not do that. This is a tough fight. Slava tags in for somebody here. I can't remember who it was originally. Let's take a quick look. Oh, Uros Medic, which that would have been a hell of a fight too. That would have been a lot of fun. But this, I mean, if it plays out the way we expect, like I don't think Mike Davis is coming out here and doing the Mark Giacchese thing where he just wrestles. I think these two are going to stand on a coin in the center of the cage and just fire. And it's going to look probably a lot like Slava's fight with Chris Duncan, where it's, let's just see who lands first. Let's just see who's got the better hands. And if you want to give me that this weekend, if that's how this plays out, you want to show me that, I'm in. I'm in from the jump. Let's go.
I'm in as well. And I'm sure you're in as well, Harry. I mean, talk about guys getting matched up with difficult opponents coming into the UFC. Mike Davis was welcomed by Gilbert Burns for his very first UFC fight. Had the loss obviously against Sadiq Youssef on the Contender Series. Came in. Was that a short notice fight? I believe that was a short notice fight where he came in, but quite the welcome. Obviously took the loss there. Has bounced back, good wins. Almost. That was the Thomas Clifford fight, was a really bad one. That's when Thomas Clifford almost got fucking killed inside the cage. And Mason Jones, we were all high on Mason Jones. Mike Davis came in, did the job there. He's going in against Borshev here, Harry. And yeah, I'm along the same lines as Spencer. This is going to be a kind of a rock'em sock'em kind of a fight. Whoever lands first, whoever lands clean may eventually turn out to be the winner in this fight. What are you expecting to see?
I don't know. Is the answer. And I think that's the thing that intrigues me in this. It could be a Rock'em Sock'em Robots thing, but I'm interested to see how Borshev reacts from the loss to Giacchese, because it was a stifling loss. It was a loss that was suffocating and dominant, and it didn't look as Borshev looked against Chris Duncan. The body shots weren't there. The technical shots weren't there. He just got outmatched on the ground. Now, do we see him come in here and prove that he can wrestle a little bit? Do we think that he comes in here and just tries to blow Mike Davis out of the water? I think this is interesting to me for that reason. I just want to see who is Borshev after the loss in the UFC. And that's a question I'm looking to get answered. We know, I mean, look, standing in the middle of a phone booth and wrestling over the receiver and whoever wins is one way to do the fighting. That's fine. It's entertaining, whatever. But we don't learn a ton from those. And I think that fight against Mark Giacchese was a learning opportunity for Borshev. And I'm just interested to see how he reacts to that. Obviously, you guys have both mentioned Mike Davis is not likely to go out and be like, I like those hips, I'm going to try and hug him. But Borshev can show us something different than just, I am this guy, this is who I am. Equally, whoever wins, can we just rebook them immediately with Uros Medic? Thanks.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, the way you broke down his experience with Casey, Borshev's experience with Casey was excellent. It was one of those fights where you're going into the locker room after and you're completely reassessing everything, because he was caught blinded by G. Casey's game plan. Likely thought that G. Casey was going to come in and stand and bang with him. Like I said, don't think he's going to have those same issues with someone like Mike Davis, but might we see a takedown from Borshev? Might we see something? That's what I want to see. You know what I mean? You know, you the poison sometimes can also be the cure, is what they say, and it'll be interesting to see if he goes in there and gets the job done. That's a fight that I am definitely looking forward to, which will open up the main card on Saturday night. A sleeper fight somewhat on the prelim section for me, Spencer. Brendan Allen against Christoph Jocko. I mean, Brendan Allen, it's just like, what is going on with you, man? It's like, what can we do here? Harry is not impressed. He's like, moving on. Well, don't worry, Harry. There's not too much else to talk about after this
the
one.
School of Francisco Trinaldo fight IQ is Brendan Allen.
yeah. Your thoughts, please, Spencer, on this fight.
I mean, it's a lesser version of what Harry just said. I mean, Christoph Jocko is a guy that lives in that, let's say, 13 to 18 range in the middleweight division. He's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's a perfectly serviceable fighter in just about every facet. He's got good takedown defense. He's good in the clinch. He can strike a little bit. He can kickbox a little bit. He can wrestle a little bit. He is the guy that if Brendan Allen is ever, by love of God, going to be anything of anyone in the UFC, he needs to go out and beat the Christ out of Chris Jocko on Saturday. Now, historically, when Brendan Allen gets in this position, he goes out and looks like dog shit. That's what happened against Sean Strickland. That's what happened against Chris Curtis. He goes out there and he thinks, I'm the greatest fighter in the world. I don't have to worry about anything this guy does. And he gets absolutely lamped. Now, Chris Jocko isn't necessarily somebody that's putting fools out left, right, and center, though I was in attendance when he knocked the barn cat Tamden McCrory into next Tuesday. Could happen. But you said, Randy Brown is maybe make or break. This is make or break for Brendan Allen. I don't think he's getting cut if he loses, but any of the hope, any of the upside, any of the maybe one day he figures it out goes just out the window if he loses this one. So BA's got to go out there and he's got to look like the guy that trucked Sam Alvey. Now I know it's Sam Alvey, but you know what I mean? He's got to be the guy that was LFA champion, that had a ton of promise coming into the UFC, showed some very good things because he is a good fighter. He has good skills. We just don't always see them in this moment. I think it's far more a mental thing than anything else. But Chris Jocko is a dude that's just like, cool, great. You're supposed to be good. Well, I've been here for 8 years and I've been right around the top 15 for 8 years. So come and beat me. And if he can't, I don't think anybody's getting excited about Brendan Allen anymore.
100%. I mean, one thing, if we were to compare Randy Brown and Brendan Allen has a few years on him. He's only 26 right now, Harry. But what Spencer said is that if you don't get that mental side of your game right, it's never going to be right. Never, ever. You can train, you can improve your skills, you can do anything you want as a fighter. But if you're not mentally strong, if you can't get that side of your game right, you're at nothing really, especially when you're going in there to fist fight with other men.
Look, I think I'd love to know what the trigger is. I'd love to know what the switch is, because I don't think it's just necessarily when Brendan Allen gets clipped that just the kitchen sink flies out the fucking window and he follows it and forward rolls into the fire. Because we've seen him look fan-fucking-tastic. We've seen even in the fights he loses, he looks great. And it's almost like a self-sabotage thing. It's almost like, lads, I'm looking a bit too good here. Let me find a way to lose this fight. And I don't understand. And I don't know if he's self-aware enough to have done the thinking on that. You know, this is fighting at the end of the day, and it's very, very difficult to do that when you're in the midst of the fighting thing. But I would love to ask that question, and even, you know, in 10 years' time, have a sit down with him and talk about that. Because this is a guy, and both of you have mentioned it, that the skills are there. He hits hard, he moves well enough, his grappling's pretty good, but it feels like there's just Tweety birds. You know the episode of The Simpsons, right? When Homer dazes off and it looks into his brain, and there's just a monkey with the symbols. Like, that's, to me, how Brendan Allen fights at times, and I don't understand it.
You're not going to be able to get away with stuff like that against someone like Christoph Jocko as well, who is like, look, there's better fighters in there, but you're always going to get a tough fight from Christoph, and he's always going to capitalize if he does. Like, I mean, when you're in there, and I can attest to this, you can feel those mental lapses. You can feel them in there, and you can feel when you've got the better, or where you're slowly breaking your opponent, you know. And like Harry said, Brendan Allen has done a fantastic job of finding ways to lose when he should be trying to find ways to win. And ultimately, yeah, it's going to be an interesting test in the middleweight division for him against Christoph Jocko, that fight being on the preliminary section of the card. Spencer, I'm going to hand it over to you to round us off. Is there anything that we missed? Is there anything else that we should be paying attention to on this card?
So, I mean, I'm always looking forward to seeing Alexei Oleinik try to, you know, come up with something ridiculous in terms of a choke. He is facing everyone's favorite shirtless horseback rider, Ilir Latifi. Should just be good veteran European heavyweight fun. Jessica Penne, Tabitha Ricci is an interesting fight to me, just because Jessica Penne is the underdog in this fight. I'm not 100% sure why. Tabitha Ricci hasn't been 2 straight wins, but they haven't been great. Jessica Penne, sure, it's not always the best. She lost her last fight to Emily Ducote, but she's a serviceable fighter, so this is an interesting test for the Baby Shark. I mean, look, Yulia Stoliarenko and Chelsea Chandler, there's going to be somebody on Saturday night screaming 209 because Chandler reps the Cesar Gracie crew, but sure. And then Guido Canetti and Randy Costa. I mean, I want to see it because I think it's going to be, here's the thing we know with Randy Costa, right? The first 2.5 minutes, electric.
He can
and if it goes longer than that, it gets a little dicey. And so if you're giving me Guido Canetti at super plus money against a guy that can't fight more than 2.5 minutes, stealing a little bit of Shawnee's corner and previewing a little bit of Fridays, you want to make a bet post. But if you want to give me Guido Canetti at that kind of plus money, I will take that every day.
You know, Yanni the Greek could be all over that shit. He's probably going to pick Randy Costa and the under.
Randy Costa and the over for Yanni.
Yeah, Randy. It seems like I like Randy Costa.
To be fair, he had some good weeks to close things out, but man, it was rough in the middle.
No, it was for sure. That's tough. It's tough, as we all know.
It's a tough racket.
It's a tough racket in that, and as Harry says, to round us all off, the house always wins for the majority, whether it comes to mixed martial arts betting, whether it comes to leverage, whether it comes to contracts, sometimes when it comes to matchups as well. But all the stories of all the fights will be told on Saturday night, UFC Fight Night in the UFC Apex. The only person in attendance, allegedly, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot to come in with that. The only person in attendance is allegedly going to be Mark Zuckerberg, so it'll be interesting to see what they're doing. No media, no crowd there. A unique show for one of probably the worst cards of the year. Before we go, we will be back another week off. What have we done, Ramon? We were only getting the band back together, and then we got to take another week off next week. God damn it. But we'll be back next week.
We can just do a show for the hell of it.
We might just do that. Just a latest news roundup or something like that. We'll see. We'll talk off camera. Before we go, I want you to remind everybody about our great sponsors, All Real Nutrition. Head on over to eatallreal.com, enter the code word severe MMA, and get you some delicious protein bars. You can see that up in the top corner beside Harry. Eatallreal.com, enter the code word severe MMA and get you some delicious protein bars. We ask for some more favors, please. We love you all. We appreciate your support. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and get your phones out. If you're watching on your laptops, scan that barcode in the top right-hand corner. That will get you over to the Severe MMA Patreon. If you sign up there, you'll get some quality content. Spencer joins up with us on occasion. Harry is there with the speaker's corner. We've got the chasing pack. We've got the contender. We've got the Q&A. We've got it all going on on the Patreon. Fantastic content. I'm telling you, you sign up there, you'll get value for money. You'll get more educated and you'll have a good time. You'll have a bit of crack. Sign up to the Keyboard Kimura, Spencer's blog each week. Listen to the next day takeaways. Look at the Severe Spotlight each Monday. It's going to be a tough one this week, Harry. You can see. You'll be like shining the spotlight away from this card, not onto it. But nonetheless, I'm looking forward to reading that on Monday morning. Hit me up at IO'Neill MMA on Twitter, on Instagram, _BJJ_Harry Powell, and at Spencer Kite. Also help the Owl Triangle podcast on Severe MMA YouTube as well. We'll be back with another episode next week for that. The guys are a little busy right now. Thank you all once more for the support. We love you all. We send our love to Sean, who's a bit under the weather after a busy week last week as well. Get well soon. It's good, sir. We hope to have you back and talking fights with us soon. We shall talk to you possibly next week, maybe the week after. We'll keep you updated. We'll be here, as always, to break down some UFC news or some UFC fight cards, and we look forward to the next time. Until then, goodbye. Good luck. Thank you all. Hit the like button, subscribe button. We'll